Australia is rolling out a new rule. Children under 16 won't be able to have social media accounts, not on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, or any major platform. And just to be clear, kids can still view public posts on these platforms. What they can't do is create an account and have all those privileges associated with an account, like follow people, post, or be part of the social side of social media. It's a significant change, and it made me think about a much bigger civics question, one that goes far beyond social media itself. Who should decide what a child can do, the government or the parent? Because that question goes back to way before there were smartphones. Every society, no matter the politics, draws special rules around children. Some of these are obvious. There's an age of consent to protect children from predators. You can't physically assault a child, even if you're the parent. We have criminal laws specifically meant to shield young people from harm. These are the easy ones. They're clear. Almost everyone agrees on them. But as soon as you move past physical danger, things start to get complicated. Take school as an example. Most Western societies require children to get an education. Parents can choose how, public school, private school, homeschooling, but they can't choose no education at all. Why? Because a child with no schooling isn't just a personal disadvantage, it affects the future workforce, the economy, the social fabric. If too many kids grow up without basic literacy or math, society pays the price later. So you can have an interesting overlap. Parents raise children, but the state sets minimum standards for that raising. And then you get to another gray layer. What kids are taught? Curriculum, values, sex ed, history. That's where arguments begin, because now we're mixing parental rights, cultural norms, and public policy. We accept rules that protect kids physically. We tolerate rules that protect their future, but there's a line where the authority starts to feel shared and sometimes in conflict. This is where the Australian case fits. The rule isn't about physical safety. It's not about a predator standing at the front door. It's about digital environments, places that are virtual but have very real effects. Things like cyberbullying, manipulation and scams, adults posing as kids, harmful content, sleep disruption, attention problems, algorithmic pressure and comparison. These aren't imaginary risks. Kids face them every day. But they're also different from physical harm. You can quantify a bruise. You can't quantify the long-term impact of a 12-year-old scrolling TikTok at 1 a.m. At least not yet. And because digital danger is harder to define, the rules become harder to justify. This is where the tension begins. Most people agree 5-year-olds don't need Instagram, but the Australian rule covers every child until 16. 0 to 15 is a massive developmental range. A 15-year-old doesn't think, speak, or understand danger the same way a 5-year-old does. They're already in high school, they're forming opinions, they're navigating friendships, they're building identity. And this raises a basic civics question. Should the government decide for all families? Or should parents decide based on their child's maturity? Here's where I land on it, at least right now. I understand the motivation, I understand the risks, and I agree that young children don't need social media. But once you reach the early teens, I think it becomes a different conversation. That's where parents can explain the risks. That's where kids can understand those risks. And that's where I personally think families, not the state, should have the final say. Not because the law is evil or because the dangers aren't real, but because I'm not convinced the evidence is strong enough to justify removing that decision from parents entirely. And there's one more point that matters here, one that isn't about democracy at all. If a society expects parents to be responsible for their children, for their safety, their well-being, their choices, their future, then parents must also have the freedom to make decisions for their children. You cannot assign responsibility and then remove the authority that comes with it. These decisions don't belong to the majority. You don't want 51% of voters determining the intimate details of how every family raises their kids. That's how you get tyranny of the majority, when personal freedoms get overridden simply because most people agree. So So even if many people support this rule, that doesn't make it automatically right, in my opinion. When the state steps in and says, no, we decide, for every parent, for every child, at every age, that's not a small thing. That's the government taking over a space that normally belongs to families. And that deserves a real conversation. Not because social media is harmless, but because parental freedom is not something you take lightly. So if there's one thing to take away from this episode, it's this. Physical safety is easy to legislate. Digital safety is not. And when you move into that gray space, the question isn't just, is this harmful? It's, who has the right to decide for a child? That's where Australia's new rule sits, right at the intersection. Thanks for watching.